So relatively quick update from us. So these are our members listed here. We've had, generally it's been a small working group. We have, about 6 to 8 people on any given meeting. And then we have, a total membership of about 12 or 15. And I've been co-chairing this group with William Lees for a couple of years now. Come on, there we go. Okay, so these were our goals for 2019 and 2020 that were gone over in the Genoa meeting. So we wanted to encourage better simulation using summary statistics. And that was accomplished with the initial release of SumRep, led by Eric Mattsson's lab. And they published a paper looking at and applying it to select data sets that the software working group was heavily involved in. We wanted to evaluate annotation tools using both simulated and real world data. This is an ongoing process. So identifying simulated and real world data sets that are useful for this is something we're still working on. Developing a framework for the comparison of results is something that Enkelida Miho's lab has taken the lead on, and there's a lot of progress on that front. Encouraging standard interchange formats, we developed a process for tools providers to submit their tools for review against the guidelines, and developed a badge in coordination with the communication subcommittee that can be issued to providers that have confirmed their compatibility with the guidelines. And finally, we wanted to work with germline database working group and maybe biological standards as well to develop a new tool to assess the biological quality or credibility of repertoire using, for instance, genome usage and coverage, perhaps hybridization and looking for common technical errors to just try and an overall picture. If you get a set of AIRR-seq data, how what does it look? Does it look like a good data set, or does it look like it might have some problems? So in terms of progress, so as I mentioned, some was published in Frontiers by Eric Mattsson's group. The guidelines and the checklist are published, has been mentioned a couple of times previously by other working groups. The submission process was ratified at the Genoa meeting, and the compliance badge is out. I didn't make it onto these slides, but we do have now, I think we're up to 3 tools that have the software badge been issued, and a couple more that have promised submissions in the near future. So for instance, a couple of tools are being rewritten currently, and we're expecting submission for those when they're ready. In terms of the annotation tools, as I mentioned, we're working with Enkelida Miho's group and other working group members for this framework for comparing and identifying data sets. It's nearly complete. That will hopefully be a chapter in the theme issue that will be submitted come March. In terms of plan for 2021, we want to complete that benchmarking framework with the Miho group. We're still working on this identifying test sets for data annotation for annotation tools. And we want to get back, one of our main goals will be building this tool for assessing repertoire credibility, which we didn't do a lot on in the last period. We're still trying to get somebody to kind of take the lead on that project and really push it forward. I think that's all I have in terms of membership. So I listed the membership here. This is people who have attended calls in the last 6 months, basically. And I've been co-chairing with William Lees, and since nobody has indicated any interest in taking over, we plan to continue to co-chair. Any questions?
I think you made the record for the shortest talk and impactful. Any questions from the attendees or other panelists? Oh, we see one popping up here from Joe Madden is asking, what are the proposed guidelines for establishing credibility of an AIRR-seq data set, I presume? Is that correct?
Right, so that is something that is not finalized yet. I mean, some of the things we're thinking about is, for instance, looking at things where you might commonly get confusion of two germline genes, or if you have a data set that's expected to be a representative of the total repertoire, but we see bias towards certain genes that might indicate technical issues with the primers. And of course that can be intentional if you're trying to amplify specific things, or if you're looking at a repertoire from a disease scenario where the response is biased. So this is not intended to be a grading tool, like you get an A+ and you get a C. It's intended rather to be a tool that we've been thinking that the metaphor that we keep using internally is thinking of it like fast QC. So you get a dashboard or some summary, and it says this metric looks a little off. Maybe it's in orange or maybe it's red, and that doesn't, even if it's orange or red, doesn't mean that it's a bad data set. It just means you have to think about maybe what's going on. So that's our goal. Hopefully that answered the question.
Yeah, I think it's generating a lot of interest, especially from members of the Biological Resources Working Group. So Maggie Bostic asks, would it be useful to have coordination from the Biological Resources
Absolutely.
Working for a credibility study? I do want to highlight in that connection that the Biological Resources Working Group, for anyone who hasn't seen it, there was a pre-meeting that they did on biological calibrators and standards. And we also had, as part of that meeting, a workflow analysis, which included some of the considerations that I think you're starting to hint at in terms of data quality and metrics of sort of how good is a sequencing library. And Carnita, and Maggie, if you had any other questions, or if I'm not asking it correctly, please write something in the Q&A. Okay. So Encarnita asks, what are the requirements that you specify for the test data sets that you're looking for, with the idea that perhaps we could provide some to you?
Right. So we were very interested in that, of course. I think we're looking for both a couple of things that are very simple to be able to like really test core functions, and then maybe things that are more complicated, which may be more synthetic data sets, where we can, because the problem is with your basic biological data sets, you don't have a ground truth. And so, the SumRep paper and the benchmarking framework that Angelita's lab is putting together, those are very good for comparing one data set to another or one tool to another, but it doesn't give you sort of objective metrics. And so those are very hard to come by, but we think that, maybe with some basic data sets, and we do think simulated data sets will be part of that, that we can test specific functions. So if we have a section of the AIRR-C GitHub repo where there's some initial discussion of these factors of specific things that we want to test for, and what the data sets that would be good for that would be.
So that's a really important point. I think the key here is getting the message out to the broader community about what you need for this type of endeavor. And so maybe we can find a way to put that on the website in a very obvious place so that people who have data sets that you'd like to play with can contribute them to the group.
Sure. So in terms of the GitHub repo, there's the AIRR community main GitHub repo, and if you go through there, there's one specifically for gold standard data sets.
Yes, and in that vein, Scott Chrisley asks, does it make sense to have some of these tests or all of these test data sets put into the AIR Data Commons?
I think it definitely does. Once we're getting closer to wrapping that up, I think we want to sort of handle that internally, if that makes sense, and work out what we want that to look like. And then I think, we have some certain data sets in the data commons that are flagged as like good test data sets. I think that is probably a good way to go. Although again, some of them will probably be simulated, and I don't think that you want simulated data sets in the data commons, because that gets maybe a little tight cheap, but definitely we can work on that.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's a really interesting point, because you could use that to test your computational tools, right? I mean, that's the whole point of what you're trying to do. So
Yep.
you a series of sort of standard data sets, and here are the answers that you get with tools A, B, and C.
Right. So definitely we're thinking about integrating it with the benchmarking tool that Enkelita's group is developing, right? So right, the benchmarking tool is going to be, any data set you want, you can compare tool A to tool B. But then if we also get these gold standard data sets, that they'll be sort of preloaded on there, and you can, see how each tool is doing on that. And
fantastic. Yeah. Any other questions? Lindsay, you have one that I'll answer offline, but is there any other question from the audience or the panelists? No, I think with that, we are right on time. I want to thank Chaim for an excellent talk, and William Lees also for your leadership for this very important working group.